physical training, self-defense training, firearms training, situational awareness, and the warrior mindset. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about being ready. We'll also be speaking to victim survivors of physical encounters, how they dealt with the aftermath, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And welcome to the Condition 1 podcast with me, your host, John Riddle. Today's guest is Mr. Steve Lombardi. Steve is a retired law enforcement officer from the Warwick, Rhode Island Police Department, where he did 20 years, assigned to the United States Marshal Service Task Force for 10 years, SWAT team for 10 years. He was a tactical and combatives instructor. He is also a martial artist for 38 years. Presently, Steve is a safety and security consultant, private investigator in the state of Rhode Island. Good morning, Steve. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast.
Morning, John. Thanks for having me, brother.
Hey, man, my pleasure, my pleasure. We have, I think, known each other through social media for a while now, and actually, this is the first time I hear the Rhode Island accent, because it's the first time we're really actually talking to each other.
Yes, sir.
Pretty cool. All right. I had reached out to you a while back and to see if you wanted to be on the show, because you've got a very interesting background. I think a lot of the things that you have done in your career, we kind of mirror each other in a way. I did 28 years down here in West Palm Beach with SWAT, tactical, combatives instructor, DT instructor, martial arts for about 30 some years also. So my first question that I have for you, Steve, is when the alarm goes off in the morning and your feet hit the ground, what's the first thing you do? And it doesn't include walking to the bathroom and taking a pee, all right?
Because at our age, that happens probably during the night several times. No, but John, thank you for having me. And that's it's funny. We ask just such a basic question, and how our personalities get influenced over so many years of law enforcement and teaching people how to be safe there. And it's I think when I get up in the morning, that mind is already going. It's something that I think with our personalities, we're already thinking about what we're doing for the day, right? What do I have planned for the day? What are the tasks that I have to do? And, including every day thinking about how am I going to keep myself, at the top of my game, make myself better to influence, my students. And as you know, now I'm doing, teaching at the police academy on the continuing education side here in Rhode Island. So getting up in the morning, my mind is already thinking 3 steps ahead about what I'm going to do to, stay ahead of the curve, so to speak. And, and certainly one of the first things that I'm doing is getting out of bed in the morning is just make sure everything's okay. Is the family okay? Is everything, is everything okay around the house? It's just the way our minds function.
There you go. So you're doing a systems check as soon as you get up and
absolutely
checking the boxes. Absolutely. Good. Okay. Were you born and raised in Rhode Island?
Yeah, I'm that typical Rhode Islander. We don't move any more than 15 minutes away from where we were born and raised. I don't know if you've ever been to our state here, John. Have you ever visited Rhode Island at all?
Never been.
So it's a very interesting place. I mean, it literally takes you less than an hour to drive from one side of Rhode Island to the other, where that plays. So it's born and raised here, literally like 20 minutes from where I am sitting right now. So, again, typical Rhode Islander.
In Warwick?
So I was actually born in North Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And, again, live like 20 minutes from there right now.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So how did you get in law enforcement?
So, law enforcement was one of those things I always wanted to do. I was one of those kids that always had that interest in law enforcement. Um, and it's something that it got back burned for a while. So, I was, graduated from college, and I started with a family a lot sooner than I planned on, when I was graduating from college. So instead of, and I had that idea of federal law enforcement when
Okay.
I was in college. Hey, I wanted to be some kind of a federal law enforcement officer for whatever reason. And when I had a child a lot sooner than I expected, upon graduating college, sidelined the idea of law enforcement for a while, went into business, owned my own business for several years, which was a martial arts and fitness studio from graduating college. And, as I did that for a while, John, I started realizing, what? Law enforcement is something it's in my soul. I want to do it. I want to serve my community in the capacity as a law enforcement officer. At that point, having two children, I didn't want to go into the whole federal circle and probably be displaced, probably leave, where my family was in Rhode Island at that point and be assigned God knows where. So I was very blessed to get on the Warwick Police Department, which is I'm proud to say a very good law enforcement agency here in Rhode Island, one of the better agencies to become involved with. And as we say, the rest is history. Had a great career with them, and ironically enough, started going into the federal circles, assigned to the Marshal Service for many years of my career.
That's excellent. It's listening to you. It kind of, I look back at it when I became a policeman and growing up. I took the test at the Philly PD back in '78. I'm still waiting to get hired. I scored like a 98 something on the test, and I was 2,000 some odd hundred on the list.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wound up moving to Florida because the rest of my family came down here. But it was a thing where for me, it kind of went away also. Things changed a little bit. I worked a different job, and I always came back to, wanting to get in law enforcement. And my thing was, okay, well, we're not looking for anybody right now unless you have college.
Yeah.
So I went off to college. And I came back and they said, well, we're sorry, but we're not looking for anybody right now except if you have military. I said, okay, I'll see you in 4 years, and went and joined the military. But do you believe that, or does it, when you're talking, especially recruits, right? You're teaching at the academy, being a law enforcement officer, is that something that is inside you from an early age, or is it something that, hey, I need a job and I want to be a cop?
John, it's such an interesting conversation, and one that we're having more and more as the climate around law enforcement has changed so much the last few years with all these different high-profile incidents, right? And I mean, you look at it, you hit the nail right on the head, brother. When you talk about, like, when I applied for the Warwick Police Department in the 90s, I want to say we had like 1,800 applicants for about 25 positions that were going to be hired off of that list. And you start looking at some of the application processes now, and some of the people will say, hey, Steve, we're having an application process for our department, or whatever the case may be. They want to hire for like 15, 20 positions. They got 50 applicants, 60 applicants.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think, we're at that point where some people now are applying because they're looking for a job. I think unfortunately we are there where 25, 30 years ago, we weren't there. That just wasn't true. When John Riddle and Steve Lombardi wanted to apply for a police department, we wanted to be a police officer.
Yes.
This is what we wanted to do. And I think, when you're looking at it and you look at where there's that value alignment, right? There's that certain value that, for whatever reason, proper upbringing, being around good people when we were younger, our values got shaped a certain way. And we saw law enforcement as a way that our values aligned with that profession. It was a no-brainer for us. This is what we were going to do to serve our community.
Right.
I believe deeply that that is still present. We have some of the greatest men and women in our country still wanting to put that badge on because their values align with that profession. And we're always going to have that. And not to get on my soapbox, but I think we're going to come full circle, and law enforcement is going to be seen again in this country what it should be seen as, and not this, this terrible group of men and women that are out there trying to not do the right thing, because we are out there trying to do the right thing. But
Right.
I think really it comes down to that value alignment, John, is really what it comes down to why somebody wants to do this job.
Excellent. Excellent. What was your time like on the Marshal Service Task Force?
So I started working, with them. It's in my career, like towards like the early 2000s, 2002, 2003. Fantastic experience. And my initial contact with the Marshal Service Task Force was for what we call the Solemn Task Force, SOLEMN, which stood for the Sex Offender Law Enforcement Multidisciplinary Network. One of the deputy U.S. Marshals here in Providence, who just retired literally a couple of weeks ago, C.J. Wyatt, fantastic deputy U.S. Marshal. And if you're familiar with how the Marshal Service works, they are the primary point of contact for anything to do with sex offenders. They're the lead federal agency with sex offender management.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so wonderful, wonderful program they have through the Adam Walsh Act. So CJ started reaching out to law enforcement in Rhode Island, looking for the primary points of contact for sex offender management in Rhode Island law enforcement. So that was my first connection with the Marshal Service, was helping probation and parole monitor registered sex offenders statewide. And if they were to become non-compliant and warrants were drawn on them, our task force would get those sex offenders into custody. The other side of the house with the Marshal Service is generally violent fugitives. And I'm sure probably as a SWAT officer, you probably had some contact with the Marshal Service if they were looking to bring a bad guy in, right?
Absolutely.
Let's reach out to our locals. So what I was very blessed that not only did I work with the sex offender side of the house, but I started working with the violent fugitive side of the house when we were looking for a shooting suspect or a gangbang or a robbery suspect. And, it was really, and, John, as being a local police officer, which you can appreciate, where, we went into this job certainly to serve our communities, but we wanted to always chase down the bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's
Sure.
why we went there. And we know the reality as a local police officer. And I'm not saying it's not important work where, hey, respond to, number 1 Brown Street to speak to Mrs. Jones about her neighbor's dog going to the bathroom on the lawn, right? We
Sure.
go to those calls. Right?
All the time.
What we do. We're local jobs, and they're important, but the beauty of the Marshal's Task Force is you were really doing the work that you signed up for.
Sure.
You are always trying to chase down a bad guy. And I think that, when you're up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to go hit a door, that's what motivated you.
Yeah.
You were taking a bad guy off the street that day. So
Absolutely.
it was, that in working for the SWAT team on my agency were certainly highlights of my career.
Yeah, definitely. So with the SWAT team, what was your position on the team? And I mean, down here, we did a lot of high-risk search warrants. We did a couple hostage rescues, things of that nature. What was highlighted the most in your SWAT career there?
Yeah, so very, very similar. We, obviously, like many teams, we were a part-time team,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we all had other jobs in our agencies, right? So, like, for much of my SWAT career, I was assigned, as an investigator, with the Marshal Service for fugitives, for sex offenders. At the time I became a patrol sergeant, I had left the SWAT team by then just because of other obligations and whatnot. But we were very similar function. We would have a high-risk search warrant to conduct. We would get that call. If we did have a couple of hostage barricaded kind of incidents,
Right.
which were, in the hostage situations were the ones that always got you going,
Sure.
right? Because obviously with the, when we had that call that we had to conduct a high-risk search warrant, as you know, generally we had a lot more time to plan something like that. Okay,
Right.
We knew we were going to hit this target.
Mm-hmm.
This is when we were going to do it. We were in a lot more control at those points in time.
Mm-hmm.
Those hostage situations that were popping off like this, those were the things that we certainly earned our money. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, ever changing, definitely.
Absolutely.
And you did how long on the SWAT team? 10 years?
I did 10 years on the SWAT team. Yes, I was a senior operator on the team at the time that I was put off.
Okay. How did you do selection for SWAT?
Yeah, so our SWAT team leader, Inspector Chris Matheson, who is now retired as well. He was on our department, John, for 51 years.
Wow.
He was on our police department. So it was just a blessing to have Chris as our SWAT team leader. Vietnam veteran, Navy guy during Vietnam. His brother, whose first name is escaping me, I'm embarrassed to say, was actually a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
So we had that blessing of the connections that he had also in that Special Forces community. Mm-hmm. So, Chris was very particular. If you put on, and I'm proud to represent with the operator's patch and whatnot today, if you were selected on our SWAT team, you went through a rigorous process for selection. You had to have at least, I believe it was at least 5 years on the job before you could be considered for the team.
Okay.
You would go through a physical process where you would, do a PT assessment. Mm-hmm. You were always required to be in absolute top physical condition to be on the team. And once you got on the team, you would PT assessment twice a year to stay on the team active. Okay. There was also a shooting tactical portion to test onto the team, where you would go through a situational course that would involve obviously live fire. And then there was an oral interview, where you went in front of a board and you spoke about some different situations you might have been in already as a patrol officer in your career at that point. And what if scenarios? Okay, you're in this kind of a situation. How would you deal with that? So it was a great process to be considered for the team.
Okay, great. It's very similar to what we did, and we were a part-time team also. But we had a 2 to 3 day tryout, which was with everybody. They'd have a meeting and then have a certain amount of people that were trying out for it, and then they'd meet at 5 a.m. in our parking garage and go for a little run. And they go through 2 days of physical assessments, firearm assessment, and then decision making, things of that nature. And then we would go to a oral board in front of the team leaders and our chief. And then from there, what we did was we had our team together, and then when we had the list of final selection, people who made it all the way through the finals, the decision would be brought down to the team. And the team would put a list of names up on the board, and the team would go up. Each guy would get up and go put a check mark next to who they thought would be the better team member. And then, so that final choice was made by the team after all the formal part, so to speak.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, very similar. Very similar. Something that caught me that was very, and I've got it written down here. It says, examining crimes of interpersonal violence and what makes these individuals tick. Does that go back to your sex offender monitoring?
Yeah, absolutely, brother. It was, so when I first started getting involved with the sex offender program at my agency, Warwick PD, we're about 170, 180 person department, city of about 100,000 residents. So typically, just in my own municipality, we would have between 100 and 125 registered sex offenders registered in our community, on a constant basis. And with the statewide model, and being special deputized by the Marshal Service, giving me that, that jurisdiction to operate outside of my city limits, we would help monitor the couple of thousand sex offenders we had across, the different municipalities. So part of my job, especially in Warwick, was to really understand these individuals, to assist probation and parole with monitoring these folks. So when a sex offender would come in to register, I would get like a file, typically like about this thick, right? Like on that person with the different crimes that they had. And, John, what was really eye-opening to me, and, it's stuff you study at the academy, but when you start actually seeing it up close and personal, it's a lot different experience.
Sure.
Is, as we know, these sex offenses by definition are a crime of violence, right? They're a crime of violence perpetrated, some of the most horrible crimes that can be perpetrated.
Sure.
Sometimes I think judges forget that, but that's another story for another day. But we know that they're crimes of violence. But what's very interesting about these individuals is how many other crimes of violence they had perpetrated, sometimes before they actually committed these sex offenses and afterwards. The felony assaults, simple assaults, robberies, arsons, B&Es, in occupied dwellings, dangerous individuals. So what was part of my job was to study these individuals and look for triggers that when this person committed certain crimes, what was it going on in their lives from these that could be detailed in these police reports.
Okay.
Or these reports from their probation officers. So if I was to start seeing that behavior happening again, perhaps hopefully with probation, we could cut something off.
Gotcha.
And I think, as a martial arts instructor, and I think that's, I think, in some of the stuff I had sent you, John, is I think probably where you had seen that,
yes.
that mentioned there.
Absolutely.
Is that I try to relay that to my martial arts students and to my seminar students as, as martial artists, we learn some cool stuff. Right. If this person was to do this, I can do this, right? These different reactions we learn. But sometimes, is that enough? And I think you and I both agree when we're teaching our martial arts students, part of and sometimes it's fortunate, sometimes it's unfortunate, the experiences we had as police officers, right, dealing with these individuals. But if we can teach our students, when you're dealing with these predatory individuals, what makes them tick and what makes them so dangerous, we're teaching them beyond the martial arts.
Right. It's more than punching and kicking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. I try, and that's why I'm asking you about this, because as I was reading it and relating it to teaching a martial arts student, because that's what I try to do here. I try to do that here to where, look, this is more than just punching and kicking. This is going to be a little bit more about getting into the heads of these people and being able to understand where they're coming from. And that's going to, once you get that, I believe that once you get that and you understand that, that's a little bit more that you have on your side where, hey, maybe we can avoid, maybe things can change, the atmosphere can change a little bit once we have that full understanding. So
absolutely.
So I thought that was great. I thought that was great that you were bringing that on board onto the mat, because I think with your experience in law enforcement, bringing it onto the mat and teaching your people not only the punching and the kicking, but the other areas that you have yourself experienced, you're bringing the real world experience in, right? And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people don't get that. They don't have that opportunity, okay? Because I believe there's probably, and there's nothing against martial artists, okay, or combatives instructors, but guys who have had the street experience, the real life experience, they can bring in and teach their students that on top of everything else, that student there is going to excel, not only excel more, but I think be more aware of what's going on around them.
Absolutely. And John, you hit the nail on the head, right? Where it's certainly, and I think this is why you and I connected so well through social media. We started seeing some of that same stuff put out there.
Right.
And it is by no way a knock on anybody that hasn't had the experiences we've had. That's just, that was our profession, was to deal with violent people. That was our profession. Yeah. And, and I speak about that when I'll teach a seminar where, obviously I'm trying to just get folks to understand what my background is. When I call it my point of view, and I express to people how important it is to understand where somebody is coming from. Whenever you're taking a class, what is that point of view? Because, it stresses where, to your point, like let's say it's a firearms class. Now, somebody like yourself teaching firearms, which I love the firearms stuff that you post, as you know, because I commented on it all the time.
Appreciate it.
Oh, God, I love it, John. You're looking at it from the point of view of self-defense firearms, combatives firearms. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody that has never pointed a firearm at somebody before and had to make a decision about whether or not to pull a trigger, that doesn't mean that person is not a valid person to take a class from.
Absolutely.
He or she is still, learning how to use a firearm properly, and that point of view that person is bringing in is very critical. But they just, when they understand, okay, this is what John has done with a firearm, now they understand your point of view, right? And where you're coming from with it. And, when I teach my seminars, I tell a very quick story at the beginning about a history class that I had many, many, many years ago in high school with one of my favorite history teachers, Mr. Forden. And he made us, and it's funny what you remember 40 some odd years later and how it influences what you teach, all these years later. Yeah. He let us read a historical account of a particular battle that had happened between some revolutionary forces and the government in this particular conflict. Same exact historical event, one written from the point of view of the government, the other one written from the point of view of the revolutionary forces. And when you read it, John, you would swear that you were at a totally different incident.
Sure.
Right? You're like, oh my God, this can't be the same date, time, and place. But it was. And what I expressed to the people at the seminars is, okay, so here's what Steve Lombardi has done martial arts wise, right? Physical skill wise. Now, you could have, Stephen Smith that had the same exact physical skill experience that I did. He would teach this seminar totally differently because my point of view is also from now that law enforcement side.
Absolutely.
Right? It doesn't make Stephen Smith any less credible of a person.
Mhm.
His point of view is just that much different.
There you go. Perfect. Um, tell me about your martial arts career. You've been in it a long time. You started at the age of 14, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what arts have you studied?
So I've been very blessed to be very active, health-wise, mentally and physically for a long time. I've stayed very active during my martial arts career. So my predominant martial art has been and still is Kempo.
Okay.
Kempo is very big up here in New England, very big on this part of the East Coast. So Senior Grandmaster George Pizzari, who was the first Kempo school in New England, was based right here out of Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And one of his black belts was a gentleman by the name of Nick Serio. So I had the good fortune of training with Professor Serio, some of his top black belts like Grandmaster Mark Sheely, Grandmaster Mike Burden for many years up here, and some really good people even before them, Rick O'Brien, Mark Minacchia. And when you look at the tree, so to speak, John, it all goes back to George up here.
Right.
All of these people that I trained with, either trained with George, one of George's black belts, or one of his black belts. It all back to George. So when Professor Serio had passed away many years ago, I worked with some other instructors during that time frame, in some Kempo, in some Jiu-Jitsu, gentleman by the name of John Rubiano, also a very good Jiu-Jitsu practitioner up here, spent some time with him. But the Kempo was always my main thing that I did, always attracted towards the Kempo arts. With that said, and I think you probably had the same experience, John, with law enforcement, we get exposed to a lot of police officers that train in different combatives, right? And we get to exchange ideas with them. And, I like to say that, I'm not a boxer, but I've been punched in the face by many boxers that I've worked out with. Right? I'm not a grappler, but I've been choked out by many grapplers. So it's we get to cross train in these different things.
Sure.
So where Kempo has always been my mainstream art, I've been very blessed to spend time with some really good people.
That's excellent. The training methodologies that you have in your programs, can you tell me a little bit about those? You had talked a little. You had in your bio, you had some things there about your knife seminars, your firearms types, defense seminars.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, John. Thank you. So, when I retired about 5 years ago, I actually had a friend of mine, Don Rodriguez, who's another very big Kempo force up here in New England. He said to me, Steve, you're in a very unique position where you have your martial arts background, but you also have that law enforcement background. Some of the stuff that we talked about already, John, with those perspectives that we have as retired law enforcement. And I got to say, Don actually encouraged me to put together, a few seminars, excuse me, to roll out. That was really that stimulus behind those seminars that I created. And my seminar series I call Bridging the Gap.
Yes.
Bridging the Gap is between martial arts and self-protection. So I look at it as a 3-part seminar series that could really be blown up into multi-parts, right? If you really started drilling down into this stuff. And, the first thing that I talk about, like in seminar 1, is I call it training techniques and mindset. And the point of view that I take and the supposition that I take going into a martial arts school, and we've probably all been there before, and it drives me absolutely crazy when you see somebody going into a martial arts school to put on a seminar, and they almost take that perspective that whatever that person's doing in their school is wrong. And it's
Okay.
like, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been at one of these seminars before where somebody walks into a school and is basically saying, that's not how you do it. And you have some very capable people in this martial arts school that I happen to know have actually defended themselves before.
Sure.
And you're like, how can you say the guy is wrong? He's actually used this stuff before, right? You're telling him that he's wrong, you know? So it's, so I always go into the martial arts school with saying, okay, my whole job here today is, and it's not a Kempo seminar, right? It's a seminar on self-protection, right? Where it's my whole job going in there is helping them apply whatever their art is in a little bit different way. Letting them think about it in a little bit different way. So I've done seminars at like schools that are wrestlers. Their primary thing is grappling and wrestling. I've done seminars at schools where I'll have like 15 guys in the seminar or girls that are predominantly BJJ. In the same audience, I have 10 like Muay Thai styles, right? So the whole thing is taking what they have and now applying that a little bit differently. And with those training philosophies, what I really build on, John, is a lot of the stuff that we did, you know, as SWAT officers, where we talk about like that three-legged stool training model, right? Where we talk about, okay, skill development, right, is the first leg of that stool. Right. Stress inoculation, right? And then those force enablers, right? Those scenario kind of training philosophies. And what I talk about with them is, and as you know, John, we've both been involved with a lot of scenario training during our career. Right? And scenario training can be what I call very expensive, right? It can be very expensive where if you're doing a scenario, you have to have controllers, right? You have to have a script, so to speak. This can be very time consuming to get any actual training done just to set up a scenario. What I talk about in the seminar is that you can essentially scenario train in war game in your own mind every time you do a technique. And your partner doesn't even have to know what you're doing. So if I have, okay, so John's running a class and is saying, okay, you know, this guy's going to be throwing a punch at you. I want you, you know, blocking that punch. I want you striking, and I want you trying to get off at a 90-degree angle, right? Trying to get off the X, so to speak. That's the drill that you're working me on. So now I'm in your class and I'm going through that technique. What I'm asking the students to do is, why would you be doing that? Maybe this is the first time you've asked yourself that, but why are you doing that? I want you to put a scenario in your mind as to why you'd be looking for that 90-degree angle off of the block. And now I'm saying, hey, you know what? Maybe that's where the exit is, right? Maybe that's where my family is standing, and I am now trying to get myself between the attacker and my family. That's why I'm positioning there. So we go through drills like that, and I show them that, hey, you know what? I want you to use your techniques, not mine. I want you to use yours that you're bringing into the seminar, and I want you to kind of rebuild them and think about why you're doing these things.
There you go.
You know, and some of, you know, and it's the greatest compliment when I have somebody leaving a seminar like this, John, and they say to me, you know, Steve, I got to tell you, I've taken many seminars, and you literally showed us the least, and I learned the most from any seminar that I've been in. Because I didn't ask them to memorize 10 things that I was trying to teach them.
Absolutely.
I asked them to use what they had going into the room. And being in a little different order. So, which is really the philosophy behind the seminars that I'm looking for, John.
That's great, man. It's you know, and I think especially with people who do multiple arts these days, you know, you've got your BJJ Muay Thai guys, you've got boxers, you've got, you know, like you said, the wrestlers. You throw them into the pile with the jits guys, right? And being able to add in, like you said, this particular thing, but not changing out what they've been doing. And I think that is perfect, because it doesn't scramble their brain to where, okay, now I've got to go and I've got to relearn this, I've got to relearn that, right? So that's perfect, man. Perfect way to set up a student for a positive outcome. It's great, and it's making them think. It's making them think.
So and John, I so appreciate the fact that you said that, and that's the difference I want them to see going into that. And I call it training techniques and mindset, because I want them thinking a little bit differently. Leaving that seminar is for letting them realize that it's about decision making. It's about decision making in the middle of chaos, right? Which is a position that we've been in before. We've had to make decisions in the middle of chaos, right? Sure. And bring order to that chaos, which is a unique experience, right? It's a unique experience for a lot of people. And I like calling it the experience that I try to give them within the seminar, with obviously safety always built in, right? Their safety is my primary concern, right? Everybody wants to walk out of that seminar going to work the next day in the same piece that they were when they walked into the seminar, right?
Yeah.
We don't own these people, right? So we want them happy and healthy. So I call it the left-hand turn. I call it the left-hand turn during the seminar. And the experience that I try to relate to them, and I try to always go to experiences that they can relate to, right? Because people can't relate to the law enforcement experiences unless they were in law enforcement. Right. But they can relate to certain things. So what I call it is, I say to them, okay, what I want you to imagine is you're driving on, a 4-lane highway, right? So you're in that left-hand lane going southbound, right? And you're tooling along 35, 40 miles an hour, whatever the case may be. Everything's good. And in front of you, traffic seems to be moving along absolutely fine, 35, 40 miles an hour. All of a sudden, the car in front of you veers into the right-hand lane. And about 40, 50 feet in front of you, there's a car stopped with their left-hand directional on, waiting to take the left-hand turn across the highway.
Yep.
And you have that OODA loop go.
Yep.
That OODA loop hits, right? And you feel your stomach drop. You feel your foot hit that brake, and you swear you've gone through the floorboards, right? And all those bells and whistles that go off. And you say that, and everybody's like, oh my God, Steve, I know exactly what you're talking about. Sure. Right? Because everybody's been there at least once in their driving.
Actually, it happened to me the other day.
Right. So,
yeah.
So I say, okay, now in the middle of that, and for some people, obviously, this is their first experience with learning about the OODA loop, right? The observe, the orientate, decide, act. They've never heard this before, right? So in that milliseconds, you have to think about, do I have time to stop? Do I have time to swerve? Is it safe to swerve? Right? What are these decisions I have to make? Now there's a stressor involved.
It's like
and
that.
My skills, right? My skills are now under that stress. And I say to them, I said, this is what you need to put yourself into in a training environment. And again, it's not a criticism of the martial arts. Both you and I are martial artists, so we're not critics of the martial arts. Right. We're advocates of the martial arts, right?
100%.
So even good, hard martial arts training, okay, John and Steve are standing across from each other. Whether we got 16-ounce gloves on or MMA gloves, or we're just going barehanded working on techniques. Even good, hard martial arts training can't prepare you for that left-hand turn. It's different because you and I both know what's coming right now, right? Right. Even if it's weird now, how can I, through these seminars, teach them about that left-hand turn and how to put themselves in a situation often where they have to make decisions in their weekly training? And that's what I'm very proud to say when people are walking out of those seminars or classes, they're saying, okay, I need to put decision-making into my training. It's something that's missing right now, right? And I build on that with the weapon stuff, John. You know, when I do the knife seminar or the gun seminar, I really take the active threat into consideration a lot,
Okay.
which I think, again, and I know you do a lot of this too, John, when I see the stuff you post at your academy there, we are, 30 years ago, if we were teaching like a knife technique or a gun technique, we didn't think about that active threat. It was more of a conventional knife attack situation, right, or a conventional, strong arm robbery kind of situation. We're now, if we're not thinking of those active threats with both knife and gun, we're probably doing a disservice to our students with not thinking about that, right? So it's like, okay, if you're not thinking about, distance and barriers, if we're not thinking about, okay, somebody was to have a knife, what is really the first thing you would want to try to do, right? Well, that chair looks pretty good. I'm not going to try to go hand to hand against this guy, right, if I don't have to, right? So, we talk about some of those things and actually, again, safely conduct that training for them to see what are some of the strategies that I can use in these situations.
Outstanding. It's good to hear. Good to hear you talking about this, because this is so needed in today's world for training people. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's something that I think it's on the forefront. You're doing it. I'm trying to do it here. I think we're on the right page, definitely, and I think the students are going to really benefit more for that. And putting them in those situations. That's perfect, man. I love to hear that. All right, man. How can people get in touch with you?
So, best way, certainly I'm on Facebook, as we know, under Stephen Lombardi. So STEPHEN Lombardi. People can reach out to me on Facebook. Also, my email address, John, is Shihan, SHIHAN 769 at Verizon.net. Can certainly pop me an email, and happy to talk to them about some different seminars that we can do and whatnot. And also, if they'd like to give me a call, available at 401-573-6602. Love to talk to them about what we can do to come in and do some work with their students there, and give them that different perspective on the arts and self-defense.
Perfect, man. Perfect. Steve, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, and this will not be the last time I talk to you here. Okay?
I appreciate it, John.
I'd love to get you back on, and we'll get a little bit more in depth in some things. Sound good?
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. You have a great one, and we'll talk soon.
All right, you stay safe, John.
All right,
Thank you, brother.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.